Hello, I'm Carl Herzog, public historian for the USS Constitution Museum. And this gentleman next to me is Marine Lieutenant William Sharp Bush. Lieutenant Bush was the first U.S. Marine Corps officer killed in the War of 1812. He died on board USS Constitution in August of 1812 in its battle with HMS Guerriere. With Armed Forces Day being commemorated last week and Memorial Day coming up this week, we wanted to take some time to look at the history of the Marines who served on board USS Constitution during its active sailing period, and some, like Lieutenant Bush, who died in that service. This portrait of Lieutenant Bush was commissioned in 1811, just before he joined USS Constitution. The portrait now is in the collection of the National Museum of the Marine Corps, located in Triangle, Virginia, right nearby the Quantico Marine Base. The general public tends to associate Marines with World War II and later conflicts, but Marines were on board USS Constitution from the very beginning. The Continental Marines were first established in November of 1775, and although the Marines, like the Navy, had been disbanded after the American Revolution, the Marine Corps was re-established in 1798 by an act of Congress. Lieutenant Bush received his commission as lieutenant in the Marine Corps in 1808. Born in 1786 in Wilmington, Delaware, Bush came from a military family. Both his father and uncles had participated in the American Revolution. After a 2-year stint in 1810, Bush had been planning to resign his commission, but was talked into staying by a friend who was a fellow officer. We're fortunate to have insight into Lieutenant Bush's personality and his goals and ambitions in life, thanks to 2 letters he wrote to another friend in 1810 and 1811 that are now in the collection of the USS Constitution Museum. You can actually download and read these letters for yourself, or read a simple transcript if the handwriting's too difficult to determine, and you can find them on our website in our collections section. Bush had been on board USS Constitution less than 2 months when the ship encountered HMS Guerriere on August 19, 1812. Standing on the taffrail as the ships collided, Bush turned to ask, "Shall I board?" And before he could get a response, he was hit in the cheek with a musket. The ball passed through the back of his skull, killing him instantly. We know the details of his death because of a letter that was written by the other Marine Lieutenant, John Conti, to Bush's brother, Lewis Bush. Lewis had written asking how his brother had died, and Conti wrote back to him in September when Constitution arrived back in Boston to reassure Lewis that his brother had died gallantly in the service of his country. Like the letters written by Bush, this letter from John Conti is now in the collection of the USS Constitution Museum, and like the other letters, you can see and read the entire thing on our website. William Bush had been a member of the Masonic Order, and in November of 1812, the order held a memorial and a eulogy for Bush that included an oration that quoted from Conti's letter. To honor Lieutenant Bush, each year the USS Constitution Museum holds a breakfast in November around the anniversary of the founding of the Continental Marines in 1775. This past year's breakfast included a talk by World War II Marine veteran Lawrence Kirby, who had served in the Pacific and participated in amphibious landings at Bougainville, the liberation of Guam, and at Iwo Jima. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, this year's Bush breakfast is currently being rescheduled to be held in March of 2021 rather than in its normal November of 2020. If you stay tuned to our website, you'll be able to keep up with details about the planning for that event. When USS Constitution was sailing during the War of 1812, there were more than 100 Marines on board the ship, including 2 commissioned lieutenants, some sergeants and corporals, a fife player, a drummer, and the Marine privates. The Marines on board had a couple different roles, one of which included maintaining order between the crew and the officers on board the ship. They served as sentries and guards, but were also engaged in boarding actions if they should arrive, and also played a role in mounting sharpshooters from the fighting tops. We actually know a good deal about the Marines that served on board USS Constitution because the Marines kept more detailed records than the Navy did each time that they recruited a private into the Marine Corps. Nearly half of the Marine privates serving on board USS Constitution had come from New England, with most of those from Massachusetts. The Marines recruited into the Corps by setting up temporary recruiting stations known as rendezvous and recruiting the people they needed when they needed them. Bush himself had actually operated and led one of these recruiting drives, a rendezvous in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, before joining USS Constitution. Despite mostly coming from the same region, many of them were not living in the place where they were born when they were recruited. This suggests that they had possibly been moving around for work. A lot of them actually came from urban areas and had worked in the trades, which were suffering economically during the embargo leading up to the War of 1812. Their tough financial situation might help explain why they were willing to join the Marines in the first place. At the time, the Marines didn't have the social cachet or reputation that they would later earn, and Marines were actually among the lowest paid members of the crew, earning about $6 a month, less actually than even an ordinary seaman. The record suggests that a lot of them weren't necessarily happy with that lot either. More than a quarter of them tried to desert at least once. While some of those who stuck it out were eventually promoted to sergeant corporal and up the ranks, only one Marine private ever re-enlisted as a private during the War of 1812 on Constitution. But the Marines continued to serve on board the ship after the War of 1812 as it went into squadron duty in the Mediterranean and other places around the world. Today, there are still Marines of a sort on board USS Constitution. The volunteer group of 1812 Marine reenactors is based in the Navy Yard, and they help provide the public with a glimpse of life for the Marines during Bush's time. They perform drills in the yard in the summertime for the public and accompany the active duty crew on board the ship's underway turnaround. There are no regular active duty Marines currently assigned to USS Constitution, but there have been Marine reservists working on board in the recent years. And the Marine Corps as a whole certainly remains immersed in the story of old Ironsides. You can learn more about the Marines and their role on USS Constitution by visiting the USS Constitution Museum's website. There you'll find links to blogs about the Marines and their role. You can view the letters that both Lieutenant Bush wrote and that John Conte wrote on his behalf. You can also see an actual Marine fife that's in our collection. If you have any questions about this or comments about this, don't hesitate to post them to social media. And as always, if you have questions or things that you would like to see future videos about, don't hesitate to post them on our social media too. I hope you'll be continuing to think about the role that the Marines and the Navy played on board USS Constitution and continue to play for us today as we approach Memorial Day this weekend. Thank you very much.